That's really wonderful. It's great to see names and hopefully to create a relationship between all the folks who are here and the American Folklife Center and the Library of Congress. I wish I were broadcasting from the Great Hall, which is what my background is, but I'm not. I'm in my home office, and that's why you're seeing my ears go flippity floppity every time I move my head. It's kind of funny. So yeah, all those things are true. I work at the Library of Congress. I work at the American Folklife Center, but most importantly, I grew up in Southern Ohio, and in a town named Hillsboro, which is about 50 miles east of Cincinnati. And most importantly, when I would ride in my father's car, he had only one preset station, and that was WNOP from Newport, all jazz all the time. And I could still remember the WNOP Newport. It's a great thing, a little floating radio station, I believe, in the Ohio River. So I remember many times going to Cincinnati and looking over and seeing Covington. And so it's a joy to be talking with folks from that part of the world. So the Library of Congress is the Library for Congress, established to help members of Congress make good decisions about legislation. And it functioned that way for a very long time, and it continues to function that way. There's a whole division set up to help Congress called the Congressional Research Service. But over time, it became the National Library as well. And I think part of that was when they moved the Copyright Office into the Library of Congress, which is where we get the trope that the Library of Congress has every book in the world, but it's more that we have every book published in the United States. And the Library of Congress is truly books and other published materials, videos and things like that, but it's also archives, and a lot of them. Most of the items that people count in the Library of Congress, of the 450 million or 600 million or whatever, are archives. And there are special collections divisions at the library. There's a manuscript division that has the papers of important writers and jurists and thinkers and ordinary people. And there's a prints and photographs division. There's a film division. There's a maps division. And there's the Folklife Center. The Folklife Center was really founded in about 100 years ago as the Archive of American Folk Song. And around that time, the library was kind of getting in their minds that what we were trying to build was a universal collection of knowledge and wisdom. And the knowledge, we were doing great in the knowledge division because we had all these books and all these maps and law books and things like that. And but the wisdom part was kind of missing. And that is the voices of ordinary people. And so they founded the Folklife Archive, the Folk Song Archive. And over years, it's matured into the American Folklife Center, established by an act of Congress in the bicentennial year to present and preserve American folklife. And I think it's probably not a surprise to anyone here that a performance by the Northern Kentucky Brotherhood is full of the same amount of wisdom as any Greek law book that you might find in the stacks of the library. And so we have an archive that's about 7 million original items that are full of this, of the voices of people telling about their lives, telling about the expressive culture that they've passed down from generations to generations, whether it's recipes or animal husbandry or songs or dances or thoughts about the way we dress, our adornment, the glasses that we wear, the hair that we style, the buildings that we build. All of these things are of interest to the American Folklife Center. And my job is to best job in the world because I get to help people to access this archive and help people to answer the questions that they have about their lives and about the lives around them, the people around them, and the things that they're seeing in their wherever they're living. And so today I want to kind of give you a sense of how to do that yourself, the kinds of resources that we have here at the library that might help those of you in Kenton County to explore a little bit, to explore the resources of the largest library in the world. So I want to just share my screen and start from the beginning and look at some resources. And I know that Anne is kind of monitoring the chat a little bit. So if I miss something, she'll chime in, and happy to pause at any point and hear questions so that I can better, kind of figure out what it is you want, the Library of Congress to help you with, or anything that you find interesting or surprising, or so I'm going to share, and I will start with the Library of Congress homepage, which is this beautiful photograph. And because it's Hispanic Heritage Month, there's a wonderful photograph. So the library has a lot of different kinds of things that you might be interested in: digital collections, information for visitors. If you're going to come and visit the library, we'd love it. Information for teachers, lots of educational tools there, and then blogs and things like that. We have blogs, podcasts, and the other kind of social media. But for right now, we're going to be researchers, and so I'm going to take you to the researchers page, and give me a thumbs up that you can see this on-site researchers page. Thank you. So this is the desk at the desks in the main reading room. Wonderful place. And what this page is mainly geared to do is to help you to ask questions or make appointments to go to different reading rooms. There are 21 reading rooms at the Library of Congress, and here's the Folklife reading room in here somewhere. American Folklife Center, where are you? There we are, American Folklife Center. So this is where you would go if you want to make an appointment or just ask a question. But really, we're going to dive into resources, which are here. And so this is where you can go to get information about all the different general collections. I'm going to bump that up a little bit. The international collections and special format collections, the American Folklife Center. Here are the archives. We're going to start, though, with the research guides, because like any decent library, we've created these guides that will hopefully answer questions. We're trying to put them out in front so that you don't have to actually come to a person and ask the question. We're trying to anticipate what you might want to know. And we know a lot of people want to know about Kentucky. And so as soon as this thing stops loading, I'll search it. So let's just go to Kentucky. Search. What it's doing is it's doing full text searching of all the guides, the hundreds and hundreds of guides, but the main ones are going to come up on top, and that is the American Folklife Center's Guide to Kentucky, and then the main reading room's Guide to Kentucky. This would be general resources, but we need to look at the Folklife resources first. So we have one of these for every state, and there are 2 pages. The first page is to invite and entice you, to tell you just a little bit about our collections and get you curious. And if you're just kind of bouncing around looking at stuff, well, that's fine too. And so what we've done is we've highlighted the recordings made by Alan Lomax in 1937, primarily, but in other dates in Kentucky, some of our earliest field recordings. and a nice little essay that I believe I wrote. And then a couple of collections that might stand out at you, archival collections, recordings of Aunt Molly Jackson, the great Union archivist from Harlan, I believe, and Mary Elizabeth Barnacle collection, and Herbert Halpert collection, which is in Western Kentucky. A couple of blog posts that you might just find interesting, and then some public programming that we've done. And this is the Dale Ann Bradley group that came to sing on the same stage as the Northern Kentucky Brotherhood, the same stage that, you know, the library recorded Jelly Roll Morton telling about jazz in 1938, same stage that Aaron Copland premiered Rodeo in 1942. And here's the Northern Kentucky Brotherhood singers, a couple of concerts by them that you can click on. But the magic happens on the second page, and that's searching tools. So I've done a couple of predetermined searches for you that will first look at the library's online catalog, and all of our archival collections are cataloged. They have a bibliographic record in the online catalog. You're used to searching catalogs from public libraries, university libraries, school libraries. And then a search of finding aids. And finding aids are just more in-depth tools for archival collections, because archival collections are messy. You know, they're the difference between libraries generally in archives are that libraries have single copies of things for which thousands of other copies exist, you know, published materials. And so you just need a quick bibliographic record to tell you, here's the book, here's the author, here's the subjects. Archival collections are messy. They have hundreds and hundreds of different items, sometimes from different places of different things. And so you need these more in-depth tools called finding aids. I'll show you one in a few minutes. But I want to talk about the online catalog. Again, we would have bibliographic records for all of our collections. So I'm going to click it. And now we're going to go into the library's online catalog, a predetermined search that I've made. And it shows that we have 196 collections, archival collections in our center that relate to Kentucky. And they are organized chronologically. So Alan Lomax's trip to Ohio and Indiana started with recordings at the Cincinnati Music Hall, I think, where it was. There was a concert there in 1938, and then he went across the river to Fort Mitchell and recorded some soldiers, some GIs. And as we can go forward in time, get out of the 1930s, you can see that. Get to Artis Moser recordings made in the 1940s. Barbara Dane recordings of Jim Garland, another protest singer. Primitive Baptist recordings made in 1982. Bobby Fulcher, great field worker, great ethnographer from the 80s and 90s. And so on and so forth. These are recordings made of fiddling, Bert Feintuck in, I don't remember where, and so on and so forth. I'll go to one of the later pages. Anyway, you might be scrolling through and find something that looks like, hey, that's kind of interesting. Like, what is this? Hope for Recovery, peer support workers in Kentucky. This is a project that we've been doing for a decade or so that documents occupational folk life, which is the folk life of work, which is most of the folk life that we learn these days. And we award grants for people to do them. And this particular one is, let's just see a description. 17 interviews recorded by Ethan Sharp, recorded workers involved in peer support counseling in Kentucky in response to the opioid epidemic. And we're wondering where exactly these were made. And they're in various locations, Lexington, Manchester. So I don't see anything in Covington, but that might be of interest to people. Many of these are online. I don't believe this one is yet online. But you can see in here these delightful things called subject headings. And they are what we call a controlled vocabulary, which is we use the same words for the same things instead of saying, I don't know, substance use disorder might have a different term. I can't think of one right now. But anyway, it's a controlled vocabulary. We use the same terms for the same things. And it allows you then to look at any other items in the library's catalog that would have the same title. And this is so very specific that there's only one, and it's this particular collection. But you can also look at related terms like rehabilitation counselors, personal narratives, or licenses. So, not to get too far afield, we have created a predetermined search for all of the American Folklife Center collections relating to the state of Kentucky. Returning to the guide, I'm going to look at finding aids. And one of the strengths of American Folklife Center collections is American folk music and American vernacular music, especially music relating to the folk music revival of the 1930s to the 1970s. And Jean Ritchie is probably someone who's known to many people in Kentucky, great singer from Viper. And this is a finding aid for the collection of hers that we have in our archive. And this is what a finding aid looks like. It's a really detailed description of an archival collection, giving you a precise number of items, 41,650 pages of manuscripts, with great navigation along the right-hand side, which is currently obscured by my view. There we go. So you can look in more detail about sound recordings that were made, sound recordings of the Ritchie family, for example. This is really detailed stuff, and it's full text searchable. So finding aids are really a must for a complex and large archival collection. So what I've shown you first is the guide for American Folklife Center collections relating to the state of Kentucky. Okay, but I said that there are two guides among our guides, and the second one is the main reading rooms guide, and this would be mainly published resources from Kentucky in general collections, and use the navigation on the left-hand side to see the introduction, which is, again, this kind of fun little essay about Kentucky, a little gallery of photographs, and then get to dig in to digital collections, related resources, external websites, and then a bibliography. And if you're a librarian or an archivist, these very terms cause a kind of faint sweat among you because they're just so exciting, you know, that to look at digital collections of archival material is a joy. And so we have the Abraham Lincoln Papers, Afro-American Perspectives materials, selected from the Rare Book Collection. Ooh. Then, you know, other archival collections, sheet music collections related to Kentucky, ballroom dancing instruction manuals, archival collections, related resources. Let's see that roll. They've linked to our guide. Very good. America's Library. This is kind of a serial publication the library puts out exploring the states. It's going to be essays and things like that. Bibliographies and guides, U.S. state poet laureates from the state of Kentucky. And then exhibitions, really great stuff. Chronicling America, we're going to come back to that. Guide to law, primary sources by state. Yeah, this is the kind of thing that you want to set aside a few hours to explore, discover. External websites. I think this is really important because they've kind of mined our electronic resources that you get through public libraries, university libraries, and things like that, and found some that they think are especially useful. And Church in the Southern Black community, I think, is going to be useful. And you can see the emergence of advertising in America. Wow. So these are not necessarily Library of Congress resources, but put together by somebody who's done a lot of research and thinks that they might be useful to Library of Congress researchers. And then a bibliography. Books that you'd find in the Library of Congress are relating to Kentucky. I'm going to show you how to find these yourself. So these are top-level guides, things that you can use, you can browse, you can explore. And they're going to lead you to the things that I'm going to start showing you now, which are things that I think are super interesting and super cool. Let's go back to the researchers page and check out a couple of different divisions that are kind of my go-tos when I'm answering reference questions. I'm especially fond of the geography and maps division. Because we think, oh, atlases, that's cool. But when you start to think about, whoa, what did it look like in 1916? You know, what did Covington look like in 1916? Well, we can find that out because of this wonderful collection called Sanborn Maps. And we're going to just get to it a couple of different ways. But I'm going to try to look at the geography and map online collections. And did they give us? Yeah. This is kind of a backwards way to get into Sanborn Maps, but here we go. These are insurance maps, if folks haven't ever encountered them before, that were done beginning in the late 19th century. And they were created so insurance companies would know how to value properties and things like that. And so let's look first at, let's see if we can find anything from Covington. Wonder what I should search next. Let's try Kenton. Kenton County, Kentucky. Ah, yes. Covington, I must have spelled it wrong. So this is, these are maps from, this is a 1909 map. And I'm gonna look at the first page. And do you want to turn on your mic and tell me what would be a good page to look at? I'm going to blow it up here because I don't know the geography that well. There's the licking.
Yes, I can help if you...
There's the Ohio up there. The licking and the Ohio, confluence of.
If you go a little south, I would do 30, 31, 32, 39, or 40.
Okay. So let's go and find these pages.
And these are the east side of Covington. That's the focus of our grant project.
Nice. Now, the funny thing about them is that the page numbers don't correspond with the image numbers because it's digitized and they start numbering at 1. So we're going to have to do a little guesswork here and look at the page number. And then we'll get there real quick. Oh, it's 40. Can we just look here? So what's super cool about these is that they give you street names, and types of, right? So on near the intersection of Greenup and East 12th Street, if those indeed are the same names that are used today, always a guess, it's telling us that there is a St. Joseph's Boys School at, I don't know, 111. And does anyone know if that is still there? Anyone know that area well enough to know if there's still a school there or a building that might have been a school at one time? It's such a crapshoot question.
I don't think there is. I do not think so, but that's the street names are the same. 12th Street is now Martin Luther King Boulevard. So I would have to do more research on that location.
Right. So this is, I know a little bit about the coding that they use. And so they're telling you that it's stove heat, has electric lights. It's got 40-foot eaves. So it's obviously a tall structure. It's a brick structure, that's pink. So looking next door, there's another brick house next to it with a wooden back structure. These are likely privies. In 1909, these outhouses, it might be this one with a little circle. So they're showing you that there's a wagon shed right here. So you can imagine that someone who wanted to know what buildings were, what the town was like, what the neighborhood was like at a given time, would go crazy over these kinds of maps. There's a drugstore right there. And also it would allow you to know what kinds of stores there were, what kinds of buildings there were. Do you see this? This is a blacksmith's shop. And this would be a car repair shop, maybe a carpet shop. I don't know what the actual thing would be. So Sandmore maps are really great, and they're one of my favorite parts of the Geography of Maps division. I want to take you to another division, which is the Prints and Photographs division. I'm just going to back out all the way here because we got pretty deep. And Prints and Photographs division is just as it says. It has so many millions of items online. You just want to scream. And we're going to look at their digital collections. I think it's the best way to go. So I think they will tell us, yeah, here are the digital collections. And one of my favorites is called the Habs Her Historic Building Survey Collection. Doesn't appear to be alphabetical. So let's try Habs Her. Again, this is going to get us into the collection without actually Historic Building Survey Collection. There it is, top level. So this is, I think it started as in the Works Progress Administration in the 1930s. And it is photographs and drawings of historic buildings around the United States. And it continued into the 60s and 70s. So it's a great span. Let's also then look at Covington. And let's use the same subject heading that we did before and see what we find. So what we're seeing immediately are spans of bridges. So they consider bridges to be, and then this is kind of an interesting building. Here's an ice manufacturing company. So this would be the Champion Ice Manufacturing Kentucky Company on 2nd Street, 40 East 2nd Street. and then the photographs. And we'll just use this as an example. There are other buildings, there are streetscapes and things like that. But, basically they're just photographing the building from the outside and from the inside, and taking photographs of what a nice manufacturing and storage building looked like at a certain time. And this is what it looked like in 1960 or 70 when the photograph was taken. But again, if you're interested in history and occupation and where someone in your family might have worked, to see this is a great look inside of their lives, because again, we spend a lot of time at work. I know I do, and I'm always fascinated to see old photographs of where I've worked. For some reason, they're giving us a different view of it, a street view on 40 East 2nd Street, the same place. Now, this looks somewhat older to me. So it's an historic photograph. Beautiful Italianate 2-story buildings. This one brick, so it would be red in the Sanborn map. This one wood, so it would be yellow in the Sanborn map. It looked to me like the other photographs were from the 60s or 70s, just based on the automobiles that we see in this photograph. Yeah, is that a Gran Torino? I don't know. Could be up into the 80s. It's the way Southern Ohio looked in the 80s. So the Prints and Photographs division is also one of my favorites. And so now we've looked at these really specific collections that you only know of because I told you about them. But if you're like, well, I want to know, I want to find any photographs I can from Covington, because I don't want to be limited to just historic building surveys. And so I'm going to try this Covington. And you're seeing all these come up, and obviously I don't want Newton County, Covington. I don't want Covington, Virginia. I want Covington, Kenton County. And so this is evidence of the controlled vocabulary that's being used by the Prints and Photographs division to describe, that's the way they're describing this town. And it brings up 83 different items. Some of them are those photographs that we were looking at a minute ago, and some of them are, from a different time period. And so we're getting into, these are from the Carol Highsmith collection, so they're much more contemporary. The suspension bridge, these are probably things from the 80s or 90s that she's made these photographs. Modernist and highly unusual ascent building. And again, it gives you the bibliographic information for the photograph made in 2020, or maybe the purchase made in 2020. I can't really tell. And there you go. United States, Kentucky, Kenton County, Covington. What happens if we go to the library's online catalog and pop that in? Because that looks like controlled vocabulary to me. It's a little disappointing. There are only 14 entries, and so it must not be exactly the most common use, and they appear to mostly be photographs. So if we can find, for example, a book or a newspaper that has the same subject headings, then we would unlock all of the books and things like that relate to Covington, Kentucky. It just seems like we're on the wrong track with that one. So I'm going to try something really broad. And you'll see the method in my madness here in a few minutes. So this is a city directory. And it has no subject cataloging. So we're just like mining data that's coming from the bibliographic record. City directories are really cool. This is 1923. They're called crisscross directories because like an old phone book, you can look up people's names alphabetically, But the second area is going to be street by street, people's addresses and phone numbers, street by street. So you can go down 2nd Street and see who lived in each house in 1923. In this one, they were published every couple of years for big cities like in Covington. And they're really cool. A lot of them are online. But we're looking mainly for any kind of book we can find that looks like it's going to have some subject headings. Subject cataloging. These are older books, no subject cataloging. You got to be a little bit of a detective when you're doing this. I'm seeing that I'm running short on time, but I've gotten through mainly what I want to talk about. There's the American Folklife Center collection. Legendary locales of Covington, Kentucky. There we go. Look at all those subject headings. Civic leaders, Kentucky, Covington biography. Celebrities, heroes, civic leaders, Covington, Kentucky biographies. This is going to have a bunch of stuff, biographies. And now we're looking at all the subject headings for Covington, Kentucky, directories, genealogy, histories, local history. Click on these things, you're going to find all of the, this is the key to finding materials in any topic that you want. If you want to look at Botswana land, you can do that too in the same way. You have to poke around a little bit until you find just the right term. And then boom, it gets unlocked by looking at the subject headings. So I think, for example, if we were to search a slightly different way, African Americans, Kentucky. 442, Kentucky African American Encyclopedia. Well, that's cool. And what are the subject headings? African American Kentucky is a subject heading. It's a good one. It's valid. It's going to unlock a lot for you. You can, I believe that your local library will have most of these resources. And I'm almost certain that they use Library of Congress subject headings in their cataloging. So if you find it here, you can also probably find it in your library. The Rosenwald schools, these are public schools, Gospel of Freedom, Back Evangelicals. It's a brand new book. Subject heading. Oh yeah, in spades. African-American abolitionists, Kentucky, anti-slavery movements, Kentucky. So you can start with Kentucky, you can start with the topic, mix and match, find your own subject headings that are really working fine. I want to talk about one more resource and then I will take questions. And that is historic newspapers. And so I'm going to quickly go back to the researchers page. I'm looking the newspaper and current periodical section, and I'm going to go to something called Chronicling America, which is scanned historic newspapers, thousands of them. And so we can look at Kentucky, historic newspapers in Kentucky from, let's just go 20th century and not get too crazy, but they go back into the 18th century. And let's see if they'll just give us yes, you can search this thing without a keyword. Yeah, so a lot of pages. You're like, well, that's not really too helpful to me. But we can look at digitized newspapers for the state of Kentucky. I think this is going to show it to us. Go. And then here's a list. 79 historic newspapers, state of Kentucky. I thought it was Erlanger. That would be cool. Let's see if we can find one close in.
One of our other branches is Erlanger, so it's
look at Maysville. That's something I knew about growing up in Maysville. Bulletin 1883 to 1887. You can look at the Daily News. With a single click, it's full text searchable. You can look for a person's name. You can look for a church through the whole thing. I mean, millions of pages. And you can just browse them, which is really fun as well. Mazeful. Hew to the line, let the chips fall where they may. I think that's what I've done today. And I hope that it's been somewhat helpful, giving you some idea of resources at the Library of Congress, if nothing else, gotten you excited about the possibility that there may be resources at the Library of Congress. And a secondary, that next time you're in Washington, you come to the most beautiful building, the most important building in all of Washington. I'm not talking about our neighbors to the right, the Supreme Court. I'm not talking about our neighbors to the left, the Congress of the United States. I'm talking about the Library of Congress. I would love to, oh my gosh, look at the chat. I would love to hear some questions.
Yeah, I'm going to invite everyone on the call to please put your questions in the chat, and I'm just going to follow up on some of the posts on there. Nicole, who's also a staff branch manager at the Kenton County Library, she looked up St. Joseph's School, and it looks like it became Covington Catholic High School. So it moved south. So it'll be interesting to see what's there now. Also, I can start off the questions. And first, I'm going to say I do recommend. I got the chance to go to the Library of Congress, and you can get a library card, and then you can do research. And I honestly did not know that until this year, which is sort of sad for a librarian, but it was one of the most rewarding experiences I've ever had. And I just happened to go to the Folklife read desk, and Todd was there. He's a librarian. You can actually work with him just like you would come to the Kenton County Library. They have staff that are there, and they are excellent. So my question is, if you can, I think you probably noticed this as you searched, and I think when I was working with you on my own research, my own personal family research, it sort of was the same, in that the subject headings were not there directly for for what I was searching. And I think in Northern Kentucky, and as you talked about your history, that, you're from Ohio, but you had a Newport radio station. So that is a lot of the, because basically the question is, on borderlands, the subject headings can be, there's no, like, this is both Kentucky and Ohio, and sometimes I've noticed in the Kentucky collections, everything is very non-Northern Kentucky biased, which is a general, that it's actually part of the state culture almost, in that Northern Kentucky sort of isn't Kentucky, but then it's not part of Ohio either. It's like, so Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky have this really deep connection that isn't always reflected in the subject heading. So I think you showed us this, but the ways of approaching borderland research, and even populations that, you describe the people's, it's like the folk life is for the people. And sometimes that also is lost in the subject heading too. The way that someone might describe it might not be how, we're searching for it. So that's sort of a large question, but if you have any thoughts.
Well, I mean, that's a problem, obviously, that not everything fits into a neat category, and things that are marginal in a category may get missed entirely. So you have to be crafty. Like I said, this is messy business. Trying to especially use archival material. And so that's a great point that, you think of Northern Kentucky, Cincinnati area. I don't know how that's actually described in Library of Congress subject headings. But in my experience, borderlands are the most interesting places, because it's where people come together and create new cultures. It's where cultural activity happens very often, in the sense that culture is ever developing. So it's where you often get developing terminology as well. So I don't have anything specifically to help you to find Northern Kentucky materials in Library of Congress, but Northern Kentucky is not a bad place to look as a phrase, right? And then recognize that some materials will be in Cincinnati, that photographs of the skyline, would be from Cincinnati, and so they might end up in a Cincinnati repository. And so there is that kind of play that you have to give in research. Exploration creates new exploration. That's what always happens with me when I'm looking at something of discovery, and that's the beautiful thing of doing research, discovery. So it's kind of a sideways answer to your question.
It's helpful because I think that is I don't know if I'd recently discovered the Librarian and the Banjo documentary, if you're about the research from Dina, I forget her last name, but it was about she was a librarian, but she wasn't employed. And then she became, later on, she was at the Library of Congress. Maybe we'll revisit that in in another section. But if anyone else has a question, I am monitoring the chat. Part of your title is curator. And I wonder if that maybe relates to the question I just asked, in that you, as a curator, you can put together resources that have meaning and have interplay with each other. So can you talk a little bit about your curator role? And then we do have some questions that I will ask.
Wait, I missed the question.
Well, I'll come back to that one, but I want to get to the people. I'm going to read. Marcia DeWitt has a question. As someone who grew up in the 1950s in the area of Kentucky that did not have a library, I can say the building will inspire awe. On my Library of Congress visit, I felt somewhat overwhelmed, just as I felt when I walked into the public library as a 9-year-old downtown Louisville library. I highly recommend an in-person. I definitely agree. And thank you for sharing that. And
every day I feel the same way.
Livia has a question. How do you know if materials are available online or you have to go to get them in person? That's a great question. Okay, I think you're muted, Todd.
Thank you. There are two ways. You can go straight to Library of Congress digital collections, which means it's online, and there are 15 million or so items here. But another way to do it is to, if you're looking for a specific item, let's say, what was that encyclopedia? No, that's not a great example. Northern Kentucky Brotherhood. Ugh. All right, so we have this this thing right here. This is the bibliographic record. I'm in the library catalog, and right here it tells you if it's online or not, and that's the way to tell. Um, and you
Is that
also,
one available? Is it?
it better
Oh,
be.
the recordings are, because I know
Oh, this is the related one.
there's a oral
Oh,
history. I thought there was one that wasn't available online.
well, yeah, I may be mistaken, but here's the concert's clearly online. This is online. Cybercast. Anyway, that's how you tell. You look at the bibliographic record, and it will tell you if it's available online. Through the Library of Congress, it'll tell you with the older books, for example, a lot of them are online through a couple of different services, the Hottie Trust or the Internet Archive, and it'll give you that information as well. Is that helpful?
Yes. Okay, we have 4 minutes. Anybody else feeling curious? And while people are thinking of their last questions, what I just asked about your role as curator. So as archivist, and librarian, you're helping people as a reference, you're helping people find things. What is it like? What is the curator part of your role?
It can take a couple of different forms. Um, it is that I have some expertise in a specific area, basically, and that it allows me to pull together for exhibits or discussion or creating an online resource, different parts from different collections, and have some sort of overview, have some broader picture that really help me to explain that and to allow people to better understand the material. I do this with the Lomax family collections. Lomaxes were they ran our archive in the 30s, and they're probably the most famous folklorists of the 20th century in America. And we have about 100 of their different collections because of that. And so my job is to connect users with the whole corpus, but also in this particular collection, like others, there are media interests. A lot of filmmakers are using the material, and so I have to understand the rights and other kinds of ins and outs, how to deliver a particular flavor of digital content to the media. So that's another role of the curator. We have certain collections that have a kind of high profile like that, and generally that's why they put a curator. It's nothing super special. Some local expert would be a better term.
Okay, so there's no other questions. I'm going to ask one final one. What what is your perspective on, part of our project is thinking about, like we're working with kids and the public about the things that we could collect now for the future. So what's your perspective as someone who helps people find from the past on what we can collect now? And I really loved how you described the way that music and song are the holders of history, just as a Greek text would be. And that's sort of the idea. From my research with you, I have been looking at minor songs from Eastern Pennsylvania, which is the place of where my ancestors are from. And I have found in the history more than I have in any other place in those songs, the minor songs and the books about them. So what's your perspective for us as we think of being collectors of the moment?
Well, I think you've hit on this, and the project that you're involved in is the cutting edge and the future, I think, of at least the Folklife Center, if not the entire Library of Congress. And that is, understanding that that the people are actually the repository of the knowledge, and it's incumbent upon us to reach those communities somehow, and one, inspire them to document themselves, and two, if we can, sample some of that and bring it into the Library of Congress collections. And one term that we use for that is community archiving. And this, through a kind of sister program to what you're involved in, there are a lot of people out there doing different projects, not just documenting occupational folk life, but documenting any aspect of culture that they think is important. And of course, if they think it's important, then it's important. That's what culture is all about. And it also, in a real way, democratizes what happens. It's, I talk about, oh, this person's a great collector or something like that, and that's a really an antiquated term, and to some people it's a little bit of a troubling term, because it is, the great anthropologist putting butterflies on a page, and giving them Latin names. It's really not, it's not a really useful practice any longer. It's much more important for people in a community to maybe get some training to ask the right questions, but a person in that community is much more able to document what's really going on and really get the wisdom out of local people. And so I think that it's really wonderful. And this projects that we're working on now, it's created locally, it's uploaded directly into our servers, and it goes online pretty quickly. And I think that's such an amazing model. Of course, we want to find recordings that were made in the past and preserve them and things like that. But by and large, it's what you're involved in now is what's going to be happening for the Library of Congress. So by doing it, you're building the national collection, which is just like the perfect thing to do.
Well, thank you all. We've reached our time limit. And I just want to say again, a very big thank you to Dr. Todd Harvey for teaching us today and sharing what he knows and his experiences. And I also want to thank everyone who attended, for taking your lunch and spending it learning about the Library of Congress and things that you can discover there. So I encourage everyone, just you can just pop in some keywords and just start following those subject links that Todd showed you. You just start following the trail. And you can put on some music from the collection while you do it. So thank you again. And we will keep a lookout on the library website for more talks that are coming in the year. So thank you, everyone.